The rain had begun its relentless patter an hour north of the city, a drumming prelude to the wild beauty Elara knew awaited her. The winding road, already slick with fallen leaves, narrowed further as she left the last vestiges of civilization behind. Trees, ancient and gnarled, formed a dense canopy overhead, their branches dripping with moisture, creating a tunnel of emerald and shadow. Blackwood Manor. The name itself was a whisper on the wind, a promise of something grand, perhaps a little formidable. Elara Vance, an artist whose canvases often stretched to encompass entire walls, gripped the steering wheel, a faint tremor of excitement, mingling with the cool resolve that always preceded a new commission. She'd spent the last year immersed in urban landscapes, the vibrant chaos of city life, but this project was different. The brief had been sparse, enigmatic, a series of large-scale oil paintings for a private collection, housed within a historic estate. The only instruction given by the anonymous intermediary was to capture the essence of silence and the beauty of decay. A peculiar request, one that had piqued her artistic curiosity instantly. Her own studio, a sun-drenched loft in the heart of the city, felt a world away now. Here, the air was thick with the scent of wet earth, pine needles and something else. A faint, almost metallic tang, like old iron and damp stone. The silence, when the rumble of her tires momentarily ceased on a particularly muddy stretch, was profound, broken only by the insistent drip-drip of water from the leaves and the distant, mournful cry of a bird. A sudden break in the tree line revealed it. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't merely a house, it was a testament to time, a monument of dark stone and intricate ironwork, rising from the mist-shrouded landscape like a forgotten dream. Gothic revival in its bones, with turrets that clawed at the slate-grey sky and windows that seemed to gaze out with ancient, knowing eyes. Ivy, a thick emerald cloak, clung to its walls, reclaiming portions of the facade, lending truth to the beauty of decay mandate. A sweeping gravel driveway, bordered by overgrown rhododendrons, led to a massive arched oak door, heavy with ornate carvings. Elara parked her sturdy SUV beside a neatly stacked woodpile, the silence of the place immediately swallowing the engine's last sigh. She felt a shiver, not of cold, but of something deeper, a sense of anticipation that hummed beneath her skin. This wasn't just a job, it was an immersion. She retrieved her largest duffel bag and her paint box, the familiar weight of her tools, a comforting anchor in this unfamiliar grandeur. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, clinging to her dark curls as she made her way to the imposing front door. There was no bell, only a heavy, polished brass knocker shaped like a gargoyle's head. She lifted it, letting it fall with a resonant thud that echoed through the surrounding woods. The sound seemed to hang in the air, absorbed by the ancient stones. She waited, listening to the drip of water, the rustle of leaves. Just as she was about to knock again, a low, resonant click sounded from within. The door, surprisingly, swung inward with silent grace. A man stood in the shadowy aperture. He was tall, undeniably, and possessed a lean, almost predatory elegance. His age was difficult to pinpoint, perhaps early 40s, but with a gravitas that suggested a longer history. Dark hair, streaked faintly with silver at the temples, was brushed back from a high forehead. His eyes, though obscured somewhat by the dim light, were a startling shade of green, like moss in deep shadow, and they held an intensity that immediately captured Elara's attention. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed nature outside, and yet he seemed to belong perfectly to the formidable house behind him. "Miss Vance?" His voice was a low baritone, smooth as aged whiskey, carrying an almost imperceptible undercurrent of something unreadable. Authority, perhaps, or something more primal. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume?" Elara's voice, usually steady, held a slight tremor she hadn't anticipated. She extended a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle for such a commanding presence. His fingers were long, artistic, she noted, a fleeting thought. "Thorn," he corrected, his gaze unwavering as he released her hand, a subtle spark seeming to pass between them in the brief contact. Welcome to Blackwood Manor. Forgive the weather. It seems to be putting on a show for your arrival. A faint, almost imperceptible curve of his lips suggested a smile, though his eyes remained serious, searching. He stepped back, gesturing her in. Please, come in. You must be soaked. Elara entered, the heavy door closing behind her with a soft hum that sealed them in. The air inside was cool, dry, and carried the rich, complex scent of old leather, beeswax, pipe tobacco, and something faintly floral, like dried roses. It was a scent that immediately spoke of history, of lives lived within these walls. They stood in a vast echoing foyer. A grand staircase, carved from dark wood and adorned with intricate balusters, swept upwards into the gloom. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes hung on the walls, their colors muted by time, and a massive, unlit chandelier of wrought iron and crystal hung from the ceiling. A slumbering giant. Allow me to take those. Thorn reached for her duffel and paint box, his movements fluid and efficient. The staff has prepared your living quarters, and your studio, of course. Thank you, Elara said, feeling a curious lightness now that her hands were free. She watched him move, a quiet grace in his bearing that was both powerful and refined. He didn't carry the items like a servant, but like a host, a gesture of quiet consideration that she found both disarming and intriguing. He led her through a series of dimly lit, paneled corridors, the silence broken only by their footsteps on thick oriental rugs. Sunlight, attempting to pierce the heavy clouds, filtered through tall, mullioned windows, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow. Each room they passed offered a glimpse into a world of antique furniture, overflowing bookshelves, and the quiet dignity of a place lived in, not merely displayed. Your studio is in the East Wing, Thorn explained, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged spaces. It has the best light, and is far enough from the main living areas to afford you complete privacy for your work. I understand artists require solitude. I appreciate that, Elara replied, her gaze sweeping over the intricate details of a carved mantelpiece, a collection of ancient maps in a glass case. She felt an artist's instinct to immediately start sketching, to capture the weight of history that permeated every surface. They arrived at a doorway, larger than the others, which Thorn pushed open. And this is your space. Elara stepped inside, and her breath hitched. The room was immense, easily 30 feet high, with a vaulted ceiling and a colossal arched window that dominated one entire wall, looking out onto a dense ancient forest, shrouded in mist. The light, though diffused by the weather, was glorious, soft, consistent, and perfectly suited for painting. Canvases of various sizes were already stacked against one wall, along with fresh tubes of paint, brushes, and easels. A large, sturdy workbench stood near the window, and a comfortable armchair with a reading lamp promised moments of respite. It's magnificent, Thorn, she breathed, walking further into the room, her hand trailing along the smooth surface of the workbench. More than I could have imagined. A faint smile, more pronounced this time, touched his lips. I endeavored to provide you with everything you might need. I trust you'll find it suitable. Suitable is an understatement, she said, turning back to him, her eyes shining with genuine delight. It's perfect. His gaze lingered on her face for a moment, a warmth in his green eyes that softened their intensity. I'm pleased. Your living quarters are just down this corridor. He led her to another door, which opened into a spacious, elegantly furnished suite. A four-poster bed draped with heavy velvet curtains dominated the sleeping area, and a sitting room with a fireplace and deep armchairs offered a cozy retreat. A large, claw-footed bathtub gleamed in the attached bathroom. Dinner will be served at 8, Thorn informed her, his voice a smooth balm. A light supper, nothing too formal. We can discuss the project then. Thank you, Thorn, Elara said, feeling a blush creep up her neck. The sheer luxury of it all, combined with his quiet attentiveness, was almost overwhelming. I'll be ready. He nodded, a final lingering look before he turned and left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Elara alone in the opulent silence. She dropped her duffel bag onto the plush rug and walked to the window. The rain had picked up again, lashing against the glass, and beyond it, the forest was a shifting, indistinct wall of green and grey. The isolation was profound, yet not unwelcome. Here, she could lose herself in her work, in the quiet grandeur of Blackwood Manor. After unpacking her meager belongings, mostly clothes she could paint in, a few sketchbooks, and a well-worn copy of Baudelaire, Elara indulged in a long hot bath. The water, infused with a subtle earthy scent from a sachet left beside the tub, eased the stiffness from her muscles. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth soak into her, the sound of the rain against the window a soothing lullaby. Her thoughts, however, were not entirely on the artistic challenge ahead. They kept returning to Thorn Blackwood. He was not what she had expected. The intermediary had been vague, describing only a discerning collector and a private reclusive patron. She had imagined an older, perhaps eccentric man, but Thorn was neither. He possessed an almost magnetic pull, a quiet power that resonated through the ancient stones of his home. His eyes in particular had held her. They seemed to possess a depth that hinted at untold stories, at passions carefully guarded. Dressed in a simple black silk dress, the most elegant she had brought, knowing that even a light supper here would likely be a sophisticated affair, Elara felt a renewed sense of anticipation. She ran a brush through her still damp curls, letting them fall naturally around her shoulders. A touch of lipstick, a hint of kohl around her eyes. She wanted to look professional, yes, but also herself. Unadorned, yet vibrant. At precisely 8 o'clock, a soft knock sounded at her door. It was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. "Miss Vance, Mr. Blackwood is waiting in the dining room." "Thank you," Elara said, following her through the labyrinthine corridors. The house, now that night had fallen, felt even more mysterious. Gas lamps, or perhaps cleverly disguised electric ones, cast a warm, flickering glow, illuminating portraits of stern-faced ancestors and the gleaming surfaces of antique furniture. The dining room was a revelation. A long polished mahogany table, set for two, dominate the center of the room. Candles flickered in silver candelabras, casting dancing shadows on the walls and highlighting the intricate plasterwork on the ceiling. A grand fireplace, its mantelpiece adorned with heavy bronze figures, radiated a comforting warmth, a log crackling softly within. Thorn stood by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had changed into a dark, unbuttoned waistcoat over a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked less formal now, more relaxed, yet no less imposing. The firelight caught the subtle silver in his hair, the planes of his cheekbones, and the depths of his green eyes. He turned as Elara entered, and a genuine, slow smile finally spread across his face, transforming his features. It was a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners, and it was utterly captivating. "Elara," he said, the sound of her name on his lips a soft caress. "You look exquisite." A warmth spread through her, a blush that she felt rather than saw. "And you, Thorn, look entirely at home." He chuckled, a low, rich sound. "I suppose I am. Please, come and warm yourself." He gestured to the chair opposite him at the table, then poured a glass of deep red wine from a decanter. Elara sat, feeling the heat of the fire on her skin. The wine was rich, complex, and immediately soothing. "This is a magnificent room," she observed, taking in the detailed wallpaper, the heavy velvet curtains, the sheer sense of history. "It has seen many generations," Thorn mused, his gaze sweeping over the room. "And many conversations. I find it conducive to thought." He paused, then his eyes met hers across the flickering candlelight. "Tell me, Elara, what drew you to this particular commission? Aside from the obvious challenge, of course." Elara took a sip of her wine, considering his question. "The brief, primarily. The essence of silence and the beauty of decay. It's evocative, almost poetative. Most clients want something bright, vibrant, a celebration of life. To be asked to explore something so nuanced, so contemplative, it's rare. Indeed, Thorne said, a thoughtful expression on his face. This house, it has secrets, stories, and it has witnessed the slow, inexorable march of time. I believe you possess the eye to capture that, to translate the unspoken into something tangible. His words were potent, a quiet affirmation of her artistic soul that resonated deeply within her. It wasn't just praise for her skill, but an understanding of her vision. A discreet knock, and the young woman who had led Elara to the dining room entered, followed by a silent older man. They moved with practiced grace, serving a delicate consommé, followed by roasted pheasant with wild mushrooms, and a medley of seasonal vegetables. The food was exquisite, rich yet light, each course perfectly balanced. Their conversation flowed easily, moving from art history to philosophy, from the challenges of artistic creation to the solitude of the countryside. Thorne was a captivating conversationalist, knowledgeable about a vast array of subjects, but also an attentive listener, his gaze never leaving her face as she spoke. He asked probing questions, not intrusive, but designed to draw out her thoughts, to understand her perspective. As the meal progressed, Elara found herself relaxing completely, drawn into the quiet intimacy of their shared space. The flickering candlelight played tricks with Thorne's features, deepening the shadows beneath his brow, highlighting the curve of his lips as he smiled. There was a subtle intensity to his presence, a powerful undercurrent that she found herself increasingly aware of. It was in the way he held her gaze, the slight tilt of his head as he listened, the almost imperceptible shift of his body towards her. "So," Thorne said, pushing his empty plate away after the main course, "the beauty of decay. How do you intend to approach such a concept? Do you plan to focus on the house itself, or the surrounding landscape, or perhaps something more abstract?" Elara leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table, caught up in the artistic challenge. "I think it must be all of it. The house, of course, with its layers of age and history. The way the ivy consumes the stone, the patina on the wood. But also the forest, the way it reclaims what man builds, the cycle of life and death in nature. And yes, something abstract, the decay of memory perhaps, the whispers of lives long past, leaving their impression on these very walls." She glanced up, her eyes meeting his. "What do you feel, Thorne? What does this house whisper to you?" A profound silence descended upon the table. Thorne's gaze became distant for a moment, lost in some internal landscape. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, then relaxed. He reached across the table, his long fingers picking up a stray breadcrumb, his movements slow, deliberate. "It whispers of permanence," he said, his voice softened now, a deeper resonance to it. "And of longing, of the echoes left behind by those who loved it and lost it. It whispers of the quiet strength found in enduring, even as the world changes around you." He finally looked at her, his green eyes dark and intense in the candlelight. "And sometimes, it whispers of what might still be." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken electricity. The flames in the fireplace crackled louder, the candles flickered, and the rain outside intensified, a rhythmic drumming against the window panes. Elara felt a heat rise in her cheeks, a sudden, potent awareness of the man across from her, and the words he had just spoken. What might still be? The phrase hung in the air, a tantalizing invitation. She found herself unable to break his gaze, lost in the depth of his eyes, the silent conversation passing between them. It was a moment suspended in time, filled with a tension that was both exquisite and slightly terrifying. The whisper of the house, the whisper of his words, seemed to merge with a whisper deep within her own heart, a recognition of something profound, something inevitable. "And what?" Elara asked, her voice barely a breath. "Does it whisper to you about me, Thorne?" His lips curved into that slow, knowing smile again, his eyes gleaming with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher, but which sent a thrill coursing through her. He leaned back slightly, his hand still resting on the polished mahogany, his gaze never leaving hers. "It whispers," he said. His voice a low, intimate murmur across the table, "that you are exactly where you are meant to be." "It whispers," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur across the table, "that you are exactly where you are meant to be." Elara felt the words settle over her like a silken shroud, warm and incredibly heavy. Exactly where you are meant to be. The phrase resonated deep within her, stirring a primal recognition she hadn't known she possessed. It was a declaration, a welcome, and a challenge all at once. Her breath hitched, and she found she couldn't tear her gaze from his. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey in the lamplight, held a depth that seemed to see not just win-tie her, but wire through her, to the very core of her yearning. A delicate flush crept up her neck, painting her cheeks with a warmth that had nothing to do with the claret still humming in her veins. The air between them, already thick with unspoken desires, now vibrated with a palpable energy, a silent hum that seemed to sing only for them. The clinking of cutlery, the soft rustle of the servants moving silently in the periphery, all faded into an indistinct murmur, leaving only Thorne's gaze and her own quickening pulse. "And where, Thorne?" she managed, her voice a little steadier now, finding a surprising thread of playfulness. "Is that precisely?" His smile widened, a slow, dangerous unfurling that pulled at something deep inside her, a thread of curiosity and a dangerous willingness to follow. He leaned forward just a fraction, the subtle shift in his posture drawing her in further, as if an invisible tether now bound them. "Wherever you wish to be, Elara," he murmured, the words a warm breath across the table, "provided it is here with me." The simple audacity of it, the unvarnished confidence, took her breath away. He wasn't demanding, not truly. He was inviting, offering, and the invitation was intoxicating. She found herself imagining 1,000 places here could be, by the roaring fire in the drawing room, under the still-lit sky on the terrace, in the hushed intimacy of a study filled with leather-bound books, or even in the shadowed depths of a bedchamber. A shiver, not of cold, but of delicious anticipation, traced its way down her spine. She laughed, a soft, breathy sound that surprised even herself. "You are a very persuasive man, Thorne." "I merely speak the truth as I perceive it," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "And I believe you perceive it too." He was right. She did. Every fiber of her being, every instinct she possessed, was screaming at her to lean into this moment, to shed the cautious layers she had built around herself over the years, and simply feel. To allow herself to be drawn into the orbit of this man who saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. A servant, a quiet shadow, materialized beside the table, offering a small silver tray bearing fresh coffee and a selection of delicate petite fours. The interruption, though graceful, broke the intense spell, if only for a moment. Elara gratefully accepted a cup, the warmth of the porcelain a small comfort in her suddenly trembling hands. Thorne, with a dismissive wave, declined the coffee, his eyes still holding hers over the rim of her cup. "Perhaps," he suggested, his voice now a little louder, though still imbued with that intimate timbre, "we should retire to the drawing room. The fire will be crackling warmly by now, and I believe a particularly fine brandy awaits." Elara nodded, a silent agreement that resonated with something more profound than mere social convention. This wasn't just moving to another room, it was moving to another stage of their evening, a deepening of the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them. As she rose, Thorne was already standing, moving with an innate grace that belied his powerful frame. He came around the table, not to offer an arm, but simply to stand beside her, his presence a warm, magnetic field. She felt the subtle heat radiating from him, the faint, intriguing scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something wilder, like ancient forests and distant storms. It was a scent that promised adventure and safe harbor all at once. They walked side by side, not touching, yet exquisitely aware of each other. The grand hall, with its high ceilings and ancestral portraits, felt less intimidating now, imbued with a soft, inviting glow from the flickering gaslights. The house itself seemed to hum with a benevolent energy, a silent witness to the unfolding drama within its walls. The drawing room was indeed a haven of warmth and muted luxury. A magnificent fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rich tapestry on the far wall, and illuminating the deep velvet of the sofas. The air was perfumed with the scent of burning logs, beeswax polish, and the faint sweet aroma of dried rose petals from a crystal bowl on a side table. Thorn gestured towards a deep armchair, upholstered in dark green velvet, positioned perfectly to face the fire. "Please make yourself comfortable, Elara." She sank into its plush depths, the velvet cool against her bare arms, then quickly warming with her body heat. It was a chair that invited lingering, that whispered of long evenings spent in quiet contemplation or passionate conversation. She watched as Thorn moved to a small inlaid cabinet, his movements fluid and purposeful. He poured 2 measures of amber liquid into heavy crystal snifters, the clinking of glass the only sound in the room for a moment. He brought one to her, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. The contact was brief, a fleeting spark, but it sent a tremor through her. "Cognac," he explained. "A particularly old and smooth vintage. I thought it might suit the mood." She took a sip, the liquid warmth spreading through her, a mellow counterpoint to the racing of her heart. The subtle sweetness, the hint of oak and vanilla, danced on her tongue. "It's exquisite, Thorn. Thank you." He settled into the opposing armchair, his long legs stretched out towards the fire, his gaze once again drawn to her. The flickering light caught the planes of his face, accentuating the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the intense focus in his eyes. He looked like a man perfectly at ease in his own skin, utterly comfortable in his power. And yet, there was a tenderness in his expression that softened the edges of his formidable presence. "Tell me, Elara," he began, his voice a low rumble, "what brought you to my little corner of the world? Beyond the obvious, of course." She smiled, appreciating his gentle probing. "The obvious was certainly compelling enough, but I suppose I was restless, and perhaps a little lost, in a way. London can be exhilarating, but also incredibly isolating. I felt as though I was merely observing life, rather than truly living it." She paused, swirling the cognac in her glass. "And you, Thorn, what keeps you here, in this beautiful remote place?" He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes fixed on the flames. "This place," he said, a quiet reverence in his tone, "is my anchor, my refuge. It holds the echoes of generations, the whispers of my own past. I built it, or rather, rebuilt it, stone by stone, memory by memory, and it keeps me grounded. But even anchors can grow lonely, Elara." His admission, so raw and unexpected, caught her off guard. It was a vulnerable statement from a man who had presented himself as almost invulnerable. It chipped away at the carefully constructed facade, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath. And it drew her in even further. "Lonely?" she echoed softly. "You, Thorn? I would have thought you self-sufficient." He turned his gaze back to her, a faint, rueful smile playing on his lips. "Self-sufficient, yes, but not immune to the quiet ache for companionship, for a shared glance, for someone to truly see this place, and me, in it." His eyes held hers, a silent question hanging in the air. "Someone like you, perhaps?" The directness of his words, the quiet intensity, sent another wave of heat through her. It wasn't flattery, it was an honest articulation of desire, a yearning that mirrored her own. Her heart beat a little faster, a drum against her ribs. "And what do you see, Thorn?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "when you look at me?" He leaned forward, placing his snifter on the small table beside him. The movement was slow, deliberate, drawing her full attention. "I see a woman of remarkable intelligence, Elara. Of wit and grace, and a hidden strength that shines in your eyes. I see a vibrant spirit, yearn for something more than the mundane, and I see a deep, beautiful well of passion, just waiting to be awakened." His words were a caress, a gentle unveiling of her innermost self. He saw the things she had kept carefully guarded, the desires she had scarcely dared to acknowledge even to herself. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. A thrill, sharp and intoxicating, shot through her veins. He rose then, moving with that fluid grace, and came to stand before her. He extended a hand, not to help her up, but simply to offer. "May I?" he asked, his voice softer now, a sensual velvet murmur. Elara looked at his hand, strong and capable, with long, elegant fingers. It was an invitation to touch, to cross a boundary, to step into something new and unknown. Her own hand, small and delicate, trembled slightly as she slowly, deliberately, placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, a perfect fit. The contact was electric, a jolt that went straight to her core. He didn't pull her up immediately. Instead, he simply held her hand, his thumb tracing a slow, hypnotic pattern over the sensitive skin of her palm. Her breath caught in her throat. "Elara," he murmured, his eyes holding hers, "the night is young, and the house holds many secrets, and I believe we have only just begun to discover them." He drew her gently to her feet, his touch light but insistent. She rose fluidly, her dress rustling softly around her, feeling almost weightless in his presence. Standing before him, she was acutely aware of the difference in their height, the breadth of his shoulders, the sheer masculine power he exuded. But there was no intimidation, only a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. He didn't release her hand. Instead, he brought it to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite sensation, the warmth of his mouth, the faint tickle of his breath against her skin. When she opened them, his gaze was even more intense, dark and full, a quiet hunger that mirrored her own. "Come," he whispered, his voice a promise. "Let me show you something else." He led her from the drawing room, not back into the main hall, but down a smaller, less grand corridor she hadn't noticed before. This passage was quieter, more intimate, lined with dark wood paneling and illuminated by softer, more diffused light from wall sconces. The air here was cooler, carrying a faint scent of old paper and something green, like growing things. At the end of the corridor, he pushed open a heavy, unadorned door. It creaked softly, revealing a room bathed in moonlight. It was a conservatory, she realized, a magnificent glass-paneled structure that extended out from the side of the house, allowing the night sky to spill in. The room was a riot of verdant green, filled with exotic plants, towering ferns, delicate orchids in bloom, fragrant jasmine trailing from hanging baskets. The air was humid and sweet, heavy with the scent of earth and blossoms. A small ornate fountain gurgled softly in the center, its gentle splash the only sound apart from their breathing. Above them, the glass ceiling revealed a breathtaking expanse of stars, a velvet canvas sprinkled with diamonds. "Oh, Thorn," Elara breathed, her voice filled with wonder. She released his hand, moving instinctively further into the room, turning slowly, taking it all in. The moonlight painted everything in shades of silver and deep shadow, transforming the space into an ethereal dreamscape. He followed her, his presence a warm anchor in the cool, humid air. "I find solace here," he said, his voice a low murmur, "when the world outside becomes too loud. It's a place for reflection, for dreams." She stopped beside a particularly fragrant jasmine vine, its delicate white blossoms glowing faintly in the moonlight. She reached out, her fingers brushing a petal, feeling its velvet softness. "It's magnificent, like stepping into another world." "It is," he agreed, coming to stand behind her, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body, the subtle pull of his presence. His breath ghosted over her hair as he leaned in slightly. "And in this world, Elara, the rules are different." His words, spoken so close, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool air of the conservatory. It was a thrill, a delicious tremor of forbidden possibilities. She felt her senses heighten, the scent of jasmine becoming almost overwhelming, the sound of the fountain, a hypnotic lullaby, the cool glass of the walls a silent witness. He reached out, his hand gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear. His fingers lingered there for a moment, warm against her skin, sending a jolt of pure sensation through her. Her breath hitched, and she instinctively leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Your hair," he whispered, his voice a low thrum against her ear, "is like spun moonlight. I've wanted to touch it all evening." His other hand came to rest lightly on her waist, a tentative, almost reverent touch that still managed to send a wave of heat through her. She felt the subtle pressure of his fingers through the fabric of her dress, a spark igniting deep within her. The air crackled with unspoken desires, with the weight of all the moments that had led them to this very spot. In this moonlit, perfumed sanctuary. She felt him lean closer, his chest brushing her back, a profound warmth spreading through her. The scent of him, that wild ancient forest scent, enveloped her, intoxicating her senses. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet symphony of the conservatory. "Thorn," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper, a plea and a question all at once. He turned her slowly, gently, until she was facing him. The moonlight streamed over his shoulders, silhouetting his powerful frame, but illuminating the intense hunger in his eyes. He still held her waist, his thumbs now tracing slow, mesmerizing circles on her sides. "Elara," he murmured, his voice husky. "Do you feel it? This pull between us, this inevitable dance?" She could only nod, her throat tight with emotion. She felt it, oh, how she felt it. A magnetic force, drawing her inexorably towards him, towards the unknown, towards a passion she had only ever dreamed of. He lowered his head, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she had no desire to. Her gaze was locked with his, a silent conversation passing between them, a surrender without words. She watched his eyes darken, saw the flicker of raw desire there, and felt an answering surge within her. His lips, soft and warm, brushed against hers. It was a featherlight touch, a mere suggestion, a question rather than a demand. Her own lips parted slightly, an invitation. And then he kissed her. It was not a hurried, frantic kiss, but a slow, deepening exploration. His lips moved over hers with exquisite tenderness, tasting, savoring. She felt the gentle pressure, the soft give of his mouth, the intoxicating warmth. A gasp escaped her, a soft sigh that was swallowed by the kiss. Her hands, almost of their own accord, found their way to his chest, flattening against the crisp fabric of his shirt. She could feel the solid warmth of him beneath her palms, the strong, steady beat of his heart mirroring her own frantic rhythm. He deepened the kiss, a soft groan escaping him, and she responded instantly, her own body leaning into his. His arms tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him, leaving no space between them. She felt the hard planes of his body, the strength of his embrace, and a thrilling sense of being utterly protected, utterly desired. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, clinging to him as the kiss intensified, becoming more urgent, more demanding. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, a tantalizing invitation, and she readily granted him entry. Their tongues met, a soft, sensual dance that sent shivers of pure pleasure through every nerve ending in her body. The world outside the conservatory faded away, dissolving into a hazy blur. There was only Thorn, his kiss, the intoxicating scent of jasmine, and the dizzying sensation of falling willingly into an abyss of pure sensation. Her knees felt weak, and she leaned into him fully, her body a pliant curve against his strong frame. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their lips to still brush, for their breaths to mingle. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, gazed into hers, reflecting the storm of emotion within them both. "Elara," he whispered, his voice ragged with emotion. "You are magnificent." His thumbs, which had been tracing circles on her waist, now slid upwards, beneath the elegant silk of her bodice, brushing the sensitive skin just below her ribs. The intimate touch sent a fresh wave of desire through her, a molten warmth spreading from that point of contact throughout her entire being. She arched into him instinctively, a soft moan escaping her lips. "Thorn," she murmured, her voice breathless, her hands now clutching his shoulders. I feel as though I've waited my whole life for this." He smiled, a slow, tender smile that softened the intensity in his eyes. "And I for you, my exquisite Elara. This connection, it is rare, precious." He led her deeper into the conservatory, towards a secluded alcove where a white wrought iron bench was nestled amidst a cluster of flowering camellias. The moonlight, dappled by the leaves, created an intimate, private space. He sat first, then drew her gently onto his lap, her body settling against his as if it were precisely where it belonged. Her head rested against his shoulder, her ear pressed to his chest, allowing her to hear the strong, rhythmic beat of his heart. His arm wrapped securely around her waist, holding her close, while his other hand began to stroke her hair, a slow, rhythmic caress that was incredibly soothing, yet deeply sensual. "Rest with me, Elara," he murmured, his voice a balm, just for a moment. "Let the world outside melt away." She closed her eyes, allowing herself to be held, to be cherished, in the secret garden under the stars. The warmth of his body seeped into hers, chasing away any lingering chill. The gentle rocking of his chest with his breathing, the soft scent of him, the rhythmic stroke of his fingers through her hair, it all combined into a symphony of comfort and burgeoning desire. She felt utterly safe, yet thrillingly vulnerable. It was a paradox she had never experienced before, a sense of belonging that was both profound and exhilarating. She could feel the hard muscle of his thigh beneath her, the solid strength of his arm around her. Every point of contact was a silent confirmation of their connection, a deepening of the bond that had so swiftly formed between them. He continued to stroke her hair, his fingers delving into the silken strands, untangling them gently. She felt a subtle shift in his touch, a deliberate movement. He was unfastening the pins that held her elaborate coiffure in place. One by one they slid free, dropping with soft clinks onto the stone floor. Her hair, long and heavy, tumbled down her back and over her shoulders, a cascade of dark silk. "There," he whispered, his voice thick with admiration. "Free. Just as it should be." He threaded his fingers through the liberated strands, lifting a heavy lock to his nose, inhaling deeply. "The scent of you," he murmured, "is intoxicating. Like wild roses and a distant summer rain." His words, his touch, made her skin prickle with goosebumps. Not from cold, but from sheer sensual delight. She felt utterly exposed, yet perfectly at ease. Her body hummed with a low, insistent ache, a longing that was both physical and emotional. He leaned his head back against the wall of the conservatory, his gaze drifting up to the stars visible through the glass ceiling. She felt the subtle shift of his jaw against her temple, the warmth of his breath against her ear. "This place," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent, "has seen many nights, many dreams, but never one as beautiful as this." He turned his head, his lips brushing her temple, then her cheek, moving slowly, deliberately, towards her mouth. "And you, Elara," he whispered, his lips almost touching hers. "You are the most exquisite dream I have ever dared to conjure." His hand, which had been in her hair, now slid down her back, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, an exquisitely light touch that sent shivers racing downwards. He reached the small of her back, pressing her gently closer, molding her body more intimately against his. The warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of her dress was a burning brand. She lifted her head, her gaze meeting his in the dappled moonlight. Her eyes, wide and luminous, reflected the depth of her desire. She saw the same reflection in his, a mutual hunger, a shared anticipation. "Thorn," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "A plea. A surrender. My Elara, he responded, his voice a low growl. My beautiful, spirited Elara. He kissed her again, this time with a deep, consuming passion that left no room for thought, only for feeling. Her lips parted, her tongue met his, and the kiss deepened, becoming a primal dance of desire. Her hands clutched at his shoulders, then tangled in the dark hair at his nape, pulling him closer, wanting to merge with him, to dissolve into the exquisite sensations he evoked. He shifted on the bench, his legs adjusting, allowing her to settle more comfortably, more intimately against him. She felt the undeniable hardness of his desire pressing against her, a clear signal of the potent longing that simmered beneath his composed exterior. And far from being alarmed, she felt a thrilling sense of power, of being desired so completely by this formidable man. His hand left her back, sliding around to her front, his fingers gently tracing the low neckline of her dress, brushing the delicate skin of her décolletage. She gasped, a soft, involuntary sound, as his thumb grazed the swell of her breast, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her. He pulled back from the kiss, just enough to look into her eyes, his own eyes dark with passion. Do you want this, Elara? He asked, his voice husky, almost hoarse, as much as I want you. Her answer was a soft moan, a nod, and a renewed press of her lips against his. Words were no longer necessary. Her body, trembling and alive, spoke volumes. He smiled against her mouth, a triumphant, tender smile. His fingers continued their exquisite exploration, tracing the delicate lace trim of her bodice, then slowly, deliberately slipping beneath the fabric. His touch was warm, gentle, yet utterly electrifying. Her breath hitched as his fingertips brushed against the soft, warm skin of her breast. A wave of intense pleasure, almost painful in its sweetness, washed over her. Her entire body arched into his, a silent invitation, a desperate plea for more. The world was a blur of moonlight, jasmine, and the intoxicating scent of thorn. She felt as though she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, a thrilling, terrifying drop into something utterly unknown, yet profoundly desired. His touch was feather-light, barely a caress, yet it set her entire being ablaze. He didn't rush, didn't demand. He simply explored, his fingers moving with a slow, deliberate reverence that made her want to weep with pleasure. He was awakening parts of her she hadn't known existed, stirring desires she had long suppressed, bringing them to vibrant, pulsing life. Beautiful, he murmured against her lips, his voice a low, guttural sound, so incredibly beautiful. His lips moved from hers, trailing soft kisses down her jawline, along the curve of her throat, sending shivers through her. His teeth gently grazed the sensitive skin behind her ear, and a soft moan escaped her. His hand still beneath her bodice, now cupped the full swell of her breast, his thumb brushing over her nipple, which immediately hardened in response. Elara gasped, her fingers tightening in his hair. The sensation was exquisite, overwhelming, dissolving the last vestiges of her self-control. She felt a deep, throbbing ache begin to spread through her core, a yearning for something more, something deeper, something utterly consuming. Thorn, she whispered, his name a desperate plea on her lips. Please. He pulled back slightly, his eyes still heavy with desire, but a tender concern in their depths. Do you trust me, Elara? He asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant, despite the undeniable passion in his touch. She looked into his eyes, into the depths of that ancient whiskey color, and saw not just passion, but a profound respect, a gentle understanding. And in that moment she knew, with an absolute certainty, that she did. Yes, she breathed, I trust you. A slow, tender smile spread across his face, a smile that promised both exquisite pleasure and unwavering devotion. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers once more, a soft, lingering kiss that was both a promise and a question. Then, let me show you, he whispered, his voice a silken thread, just how truly beautiful you are. He rose, lifting her with him effortlessly, still holding her close. He didn't take her out of the conservatory, but instead, led her to a more secluded corner, where a luxurious daybed, covered in plush velvet cushions, nestled amongst the ferns, half hidden from view. It was a place designed for intimate moments, for languid contemplation, for dreams woven in moonlight. He gently lowered her onto the cushions, his eyes never leaving hers. The soft velvet enveloped her, a luxurious embrace. He knelt beside the daybed, his hand still cupping her breast, his thumbs still tracing lazy circles over her nipple. The sensation was pure, unadulterated bliss. "Rest, my love," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "and let me adore you." He leaned down, his lips brushing her forehead, then her eyelids, then the sensitive skin just beneath her ear. Each kiss was a promise, a building wave of sensation. His hand, still cupping her breast, slowly, reverently, slipped further beneath the fabric, releasing the last constraint of her bodice. The cool air brushed against her bared skin for a moment, then his warm palm covered her, holding her gently, possessively. Elara arched her back, a soft moan escaping her. Her eyes, heavy-lidded with desire, met his. The stars above seemed to spin. The jasmine scent intensified, and the gurgling fountain became a frantic rush in her ears. She was lost, deliciously, completely lost, in the intoxicating world Thorn had created for her. He leaned closer, his dark head descending, and his lips found the peak of her breast. A gasp tore from her throat as he drew her into his mouth, a soft suckling motion that sent a shockwave of pure, unadulterated pleasure through her entire body. Every nerve ending sang, every muscle trembled. Her fingers clenched into the velvet cushions beneath her, her body alight with a fire she had never known. He lifted his head, his eyes dark with unbridled desire, a triumphant gleam in their depths. "This is just the beginning, Elara," he whispered, his voice a low, sensual promise. "Just the beginning of everything." He leaned down again, his lips brushing hers, a soft, lingering kiss that promised untold pleasures, a journey into the heart of shared passion. Her body was a symphony of yearning, aching for his touch, for his presence, for the complete and utter surrender that awaited them both. The night was still young, and the whispered secrets of the house and of their hearts were only just beginning to unfold. He leaned down again, his lips brushing hers. A soft, lingering kiss that promised untold pleasures. A journey into the heart of shared passion. Her body was a symphony of yearning, aching for his touch, for his presence, for the complete and utter surrender that awaited them both. The night was still young, and the whispered secrets of the house and of their hearts were only just beginning to unfold. His lips claimed hers fully then, a slow, deliberate dance that began like a sigh and deepened into a fervent plea. Elara responded instantly, her own mouth softening, opening, inviting him in. It was a kiss that tasted of aged whiskey and wild honey, of unspoken desire and long-awaited relief. His hand, so strong and capable, moved from her waist to cup her jaw, his thumbs stroking the delicate skin beneath her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Her fingers emboldened, tangled in the rich silk of his hair, pulling him closer, closer still, until there was no space left between them, only the delicious pressure of their bodies meeting. The world outside the cozy circle of the fire seemed to fade into oblivion. There was only the heat of their shared breath, the soft murmur of their lips, the accelerating rhythm of their hearts. Gabriel's other hand found its way to the small of her back, pressing her against the hard planes of his body, letting her feel the undeniable proof of his desire, a heat that mirrored her own. A soft gasp escaped her as his tongue sought hers, a tender, teasing invasion that promised deeper intimacies. She met him, matched him, her own passion rising like a tide, crashing against the shores of his. He broke the kiss reluctantly, his forehead resting against hers, eyes closed, breathing heavily. "Elara," he murmured again, his voice raw, thick with emotion. "You are everything I never knew I was missing." Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his dark, intense gaze. In their depths, she saw a reflection of her own longing, a profound tenderness that made her heart ache with a sweet, exquisite pain. "And you, Gabriel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You are the answer to a question I didn't even know how to ask." He straightened slightly, but his hands remained on her, anchoring her, reminding her of his presence. His gaze dropped to her lips, swollen and red from their kiss, then traced a path down her throat, lingering on the pulse fluttering wildly at its base, before descending to the gentle swell of her breasts, beneath the silk of her dress. A silent invitation passed between them, a question and an affirmation, understood without a single word. With a gentle tug, he led her away from the warmth of the hearth, their fingers intertwined, their steps synchronized. The house, once a place of quiet mystery, now felt like a silent conspirator, its shadows deepening, its old timbers sighing with ancient secrets and new beginnings. They moved through the grand hall, the polished floorboards cool beneath Elara's bare feet, the air hushed and expectant. Each step was a deliberate choice, a journey not just through space, but into the very heart of their unfolding story. As they ascended the sweeping staircase, the banister cool beneath her fingertips, Elara's anticipation mounted. The soft glow of strategically placed sconces cast long, dancing shadows, turning the familiar architecture into something ethereal, almost dreamlike. Gabriel kept her hand firmly in his, a silent promise of guidance and protection. His presence beside her was a warm, anchoring force, chasing away any lingering trepidation, replacing it with a thrilling sense of adventure. He led her to a door at the end of a quiet corridor, a heavy oak door that seemed to hold its breath. Pushing it open, he revealed a chamber, bathed in the soft golden light of a few strategically placed lamps. This was Gabriel's private sanctuary, his bedroom, and it was everything Elara had imagined, and more. A vast, four-poster bed, draped in rich, dark fabrics, dominated the room. The scent of sandalwood and something uniquely Gabriel, clean linen, a hint of spice, and the subtle warmth of his skin, filled the air. A fire crackled softly in a stone fireplace, casting a flickering dance of light and shadow across the walls, which were adorned with dark, antique tapestries. A plush rug, deep crimson, invited them further in. Gabriel released her hand, moving to the fireplace, where he added another log, stirring the embers until new flames burst forth, brighter and more welcoming. He turned to her then, his eyes in the firelight, like molten gold. "Come here, Elara," he said, his voice a low, seductive rumble that vibrated through her very bones. She obeyed, her steps light, her gaze fixed on him. As she drew closer, he reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, then drifting down her neck to the delicate line of her collarbone. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice thick with admiration, his thumbs gently brushing the fabric of her dress at her shoulders. He began to unbutton the tiny silk buttons of her dress, a slow, deliberate roll that sent shivers of exquisite pleasure through her. Each button released felt like a sigh, a shedding of the day, of inhibitions, of everything that stood between them. His fingers were warm against her skin as he worked, occasionally brushing her flesh, sending sparks of sensation everywhere they touched. Elara stood utterly still, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes never leaving his. It was an act of profound intimacy, this unveiling, and she felt a beautiful vulnerability blooming within her. When the last button was undone, he gently pulled the silk from her shoulders, letting it slide down her arms, pooling at her feet like a discarded dream. She stood before him in a simple lace chemise, its delicate fabric clinging to her curves, revealing just enough to tantalize, to promise more. The firelight played across her skin, painting her in hues of gold and rose. Gabriel's gaze swept over her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her skin tingle. His eyes, dark and intense, held a hunger that thrilled her, a reverence that touched her soul. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice barely audible. Then, with a movement so fluid and graceful, he reached for the hem of her chemise, his fingers brushing her hip as he gently lifted it. Elara raised her arms, allowing him to draw the lace over her head until she stood before him, bathed in the firelight, in nothing but the soft glow of her own skin. A flush crept up her neck, but she met his gaze, unafraid, unashamed. She had never felt so seen, so desired, so utterly herself. He stepped closer, his hands coming to rest on her waist, his thumbs tracing slow circles on her bare skin. "Now, let me return the favor," he murmured, his eyes holding hers as he reached for the buttons of his own shirt. Elara watched, mesmerized, as he unfastened each button, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, the sculpted muscles, the dark hair that feathered down to his navel. The shirt came off, then the waistcoat, tossed casually onto a nearby chair. He moved with an innate grace, a powerful masculinity that captivated her. Her gaze devoured him, the strong column of his neck, the powerful shoulders, the defined arms. He was magnificent, a testament to strength and raw sensuality. He paused then, his gaze dropping to her lips, a silent question passing between them. With a soft sigh, he reached for the buckle of his belt, and then the button of his trousers. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drum beat in the quiet room. He shed the last of his clothing with an unhurried confidence, standing before her, a breathtaking vision of masculine power and desire. He was even more beautiful than she had imagined. His body was lean and muscular, honed by years of physical activity, every curve and plane a testament to strength. And his arousal, bold and undeniable, stood as a testament to his desire for her, a sight that sent a delicious tremor through her. Gabriel reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and led her to the edge of the bed. They sat, side by side, the warmth of their skin a comforting presence. He turned to face her, his hands coming to rest on her thighs, his touch light, exploratory. "Are you ready, Elara?" he asked, his voice low, earnest. "For this? For us?" Elara leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. "More than ready, Gabriel," she breathed against his mouth. "I think I've been waiting for this my whole life." He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that made her heart melt. Then, he gently pushed her back onto the pillows, following her down, his body a warm, heavy weight against hers. His lips found hers again, a deeper, more urgent kiss this time, conveying all the words they no longer needed to speak. His hands explored her body with a tender reverence, tracing the curve of her hip, the swell of her breast, the delicate arch of her foot. Each touch was a promise, a revelation, awakening dormant sensations, igniting fires she hadn't known existed. She responded in kind, her hands mapping the terrain of his back, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her fingertips, luxuriating in the texture of his skin. He moved above her, his gaze locked with hers, a silent communication passing between them. She felt the brush of his chest hair against her breasts, the thrilling friction of their bare skin. His breath was warm on her face, his scent intoxicating. He leaned down, placing soft kisses along her jawline, down her neck, lingering at the hollow of her throat. "You are so soft," he whispered, his voice a low growl against her skin. "So beautiful." His lips found her breast, suckling gently, sending a shockwave of pleasure through her that made her arch into him. Her fingers tangled in his hair, holding him closer, silently urging him on. He moved from one breast to the other, teasing, tasting, driving her to the brink of exquisite sensation. Elara's hips began to move instinctively, a primal rhythm building within her, a silent invitation for him to deepen their connection. Gabriel seemed to understand, his body responding to her unspoken plea. He shifted, his hand finding its way between her thighs, his fingers brushing against the tender core of her, sending a jolt of pure desire through her. A soft moan escaped her lips as his touch grew more confident, more intimate. He moved slowly, deliberately, exploring her, teasing her, bringing her closer and closer to the edge. Her body thrummed with a beautiful, unbearable tension, every nerve ending alive and singing. She arched against his hand, seeking more, needing more. "Look at me, Elara," he commanded softly, his voice a steadying force amidst the storm of her senses. She opened her eyes, meeting his. In their depths, she saw not just passion, but a profound tenderness, a deep connection that transcended the physical. It was in that moment, seeing the unwavering devotion in his gaze, that she knew, truly knew, that she loved him. He moved then, positioning himself above her, his strong thighs bracketing hers. He looked down at her, his eyes dark with desire, yet filled with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "My Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He began to enter her slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to absorb the profound intimacy of their union. She gasped as he filled her, a feeling of completeness washing over her, a sense of finally coming home. Her arms wrapped around his back, holding him tight, pulling him deeper. Their eyes remained locked, a silent conversation of pleasure, of longing fulfilled, of two souls finally intertwining. He began to move, a slow, rhythmic sway that quickly deepened into a powerful, ancient dance. Elara met him stroke for stroke, her body arching, her hips rising to meet his thrusts. The rhythm grew, faster, more intense, a symphony of skin against skin, breath against breath, heart against heart. The bed creaked softly beneath them, the fire crackled, and the only other sounds were their ragged breaths, their whispered moans, and the exquisite song of their bodies uniting. Waves of pleasure washed over Elara, building higher and higher, a tide of sensation that threatened to overwhelm her. She felt herself losing control, dissolving into pure feeling, pure sensation. Gabriel held her gaze, a silent anchor in the storm of her pleasure. He pushed into her, deeper, harder, faster, his own passion mirroring hers, a primal urgency that consumed them both. She cried out his name, her voice raw with ecstasy, as a powerful climax surged through her, shaking her to her core. Her body convulsed around him, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world of pure sensation. Moments later, with a guttural groan, Gabriel joined her, his body tensing, his cry echoing hers as he found his own release, pouring himself into her, a testament to their shared passion, their complete surrender. He collapsed onto her, his weight a welcome comfort, his breath hot against her ear. They lay tangled together, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in unison. The world slowly returned, though it felt irrevocably changed. Imbued with a new light, a new warmth. Gabriel shifted, propping himself up on an elbow, looking down at her, his eyes soft and content. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Are you all right, my love?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Elara smiled, a slow, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "More than all right, Gabriel," she whispered, her voice still trembling with the aftershocks of their union. "I'm perfect, complete." He kissed her then, a tender, lingering kiss that tasted of contentment and deep affection. He pulled the heavy duvet up, covering them both, cocooning them in warmth and intimacy. They lay intertwined, his arm wrapped around her, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The fire in the hearth slowly dwindled, casting softer, more muted shadows. The silence of the house was no longer expectant, but peaceful, settled. It felt as if the ancient walls had witnessed their love, embracing them, holding them safe. Elara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of belonging she had never known before. This grand, mysterious house, once a place of beautiful solitude, now felt like home, not just because of its stones and timber, but because Gabriel was here, and because they were together. She drifted into a sleep as deep and satisfying as the love-making that preceded it, nestled safely in the circle of his arms. The first rays of dawn, pale and ethereal, filtered through the heavy drapes, painting streaks of silver across the room. Elara stirred, slowly opening her eyes to the unfamiliar yet utterly comforting sight of Gabriel's sleeping face. He was still holding her close, his breathing deep and even, a picture of peaceful strength. A soft smile touched her lips as she remembered the night, every touch, every kiss, every whispered word. It hadn't been a dream. It had been real, profound, and utterly transformative. Her body still hummed with the echoes of their passion, a gentle warmth that spread through her limbs. She gently extricated herself from his embrace, careful not to wake him, and slipped out of bed. The air was cool against her skin, but the memory of his warmth lingered. She padded silently to the window, pulling back a corner of the drape. Outside, the garden was awakening, bathed in the soft, misty light of early morning. A deer grazed peacefully on the lawn, its breath pluming in the crisp air. She felt a lightness in her step, a joyful anticipation for the day ahead. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter. It was the beginning of something real, something enduring. She knew it in her heart, felt it in her soul. A soft rustle from the bed announced Gabriel's awakening. She turned to see him, propped up on his elbow, his dark hair tousled, his eyes still heavy with sleep, but alight with a gentle warmth as he looked at her. "Good morning, my love," he murmured, his voice a soft morning rumble. "Come back to bed." Elara walked back to him, a radiant smile on her face. She climbed back into the warmth of the duvet, snuggling against him. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I dreamt of you," he whispered, his lips brushing her hair. "Of laughter and sunlight and a lifetime of mornings just like this." Elara looked up at him, her eyes shining. "And I dreamt of a future," she confessed. "A future I never dared to imagine until now. A future with you in this beautiful place." He held her tighter, his embrace a promise. "This house," he said, his voice soft, "it holds many stories. But I think its favorite one is just beginning." He kissed her then, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of new beginnings, of shared dreams, of a love that was just starting to unfurl its magnificent wings. The sun climbed higher, casting golden beams across the room, illuminating them in their embrace. The air was filled with the promise of a new day, and a new life. Elara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had found her forever, not just in Gabriel, but in the quiet magic of the house, and in the profound, passionate love they had discovered together. The whispered secrets of the house had indeed unfolded, revealing the most beautiful secret of all. A love that was destined to fill its ancient halls with joy, laughter, and an endless, burning passion.